After 17 years, my wife cheated, pushed for open marriage. I divorced, now she wants me back. 17 years of marriage. 17 years of trust, commitment, and what I thought was a loving relationship. But everything came crashing down when my wife, out of nowhere, confessed that she had been unfaithful. At first, I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to react. Then she proposed something even more shocking, a request for an open marriage. She wanted the freedom to be with others, while still keeping me in the picture. It was as if everything we built together had no value anymore. I had spent so long trying to make our marriage work, trying to make her happy. But this was beyond me. So I made the painful decision to divorce. I walked away from everything. But now, after everything, she wants me back. She says she's changed, that she made a mistake. But after all this time, how can I believe her? And the biggest question I keep asking myself, should I go back to a life that almost broke me? For nearly 2 decades, I believed I was living the dream. A wife who stood by my side, children who adored us both, and a comfortable life that we had built together from the ground up. Our days were filled with the little moments. Family dinners, weekend outings, anniversaries, and quiet evenings at home. I had thought that marriage, real marriage, was about stability, compromise, and unwavering trust. In my mind, we had everything, except for one thing that I could never have imagined we were missing. When we first met, she was everything I had ever wanted. Intelligent, caring, and passionate about life. We clicked immediately, and I never questioned our future together. I had been a good husband. I supported her, I listened to her, and I made sure to always prioritize her needs. We had a great partnership, and I thought that was enough to keep our love strong forever. I would never have thought that something so simple as the lack of open communication could be the one thing to drive us apart. When she first came to me with the idea of an open marriage, I was confused. How could someone who had seemed so committed to me suddenly want something so different? She claimed it was a need that had been building up for a long time. She wanted to explore other connections but still be married to me, to have both worlds. The proposition left me stunned, speechless. I remember asking her, why now? Why after all this time? But she just kept insisting that it wasn't about me. She loved me, but she needed something more. I tried to understand, but as the days passed, I felt the distance growing between us. The more she pushed for this open marriage, the more I began to feel like the man I once was, the person who had been the center of her world, was slowly slipping away. I had no choice but to begin questioning everything. What was real, what was a lie, and why did she feel the need to step outside of our marriage in the first place? The foundation of our marriage was built on mutual respect and understanding. At least that's how it felt in the beginning. We supported each other's dreams, grew together, and forged a life that I thought we both treasured equally. Our children were everything to us. 2 beautiful kids, full of energy and potential. Life, despite the occasional challenge, felt predictable and comfortable. I had no reason to believe things weren't as they seemed. But as time passed, I noticed subtle shifts in her behavior. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. Small things. She started spending more time with her friends, often talking about her childhood best friend, someone she'd known long before me. She laughed more easily around him. She seemed to light up in a way I hadn't seen in years. I told myself it was nothing. After all, what's wrong with a little reconnection with old friends? But deep down, I couldn't shake a feeling, a nagging sense that something was off. The tension continued to grow. I was busy with work, and she was taking on more responsibilities at home. Yet, there was a quiet undercurrent, something unspoken. Then one evening, after months of these subtle changes, she sat me down and said those words I will never forget. I've been thinking about what it would be like if we had an open marriage. I was floored. The idea made my mind race, but I kept calm and asked her what exactly she meant by that. Her response shocked me even more. She was willing to have other relationships, even sexual ones, while maintaining the marriage. I thought she had to be joking, but there was no humor in her eyes. She was serious. We argued. We cried. But in the end, the damage was done. The trust, the foundation of our relationship, felt shattered. She wasn't asking for an affair. She was asking for an agreement to share our lives with other people. This, I realized, wasn't something I could compromise on. I had to make a choice. After the conversation about the open marriage, I did not know what to do. I was torn, confused, and hurt. Every fiber of my being was screaming that something was wrong, but I did not want to jump to conclusions. I told myself that I needed time to think, to process everything that had been said. Time was something I thought I had in abundance. What I did not realize was that time would only reveal the truth, and that truth was far worse than I had ever imagined. Over the following weeks, I tried to keep things normal. I wanted to believe that I could accept her desires, that I could somehow wrap my mind around the idea of her being with someone else while still being married to me. But the more I tried to accept it, the more distant she became. Her energy, her attention, it was no longer directed at me. She seemed distracted, distant, and disinterested in the life we had built together. It was as if she had already emotionally checked out, waiting for me to catch up. But I was not ready. I began to notice small things, details that had once seemed insignificant. She was leaving her phone unattended more often. There were texts that were too quick to be read before she put her phone down. She was spending more and more time out of the house, and it was becoming harder for me to ignore. The strange thing was, she was becoming defensive whenever I asked where she had been or who she had been with. At first, I dismissed it. I trusted her. I believed in the person I married. And surely, I was overthinking everything. But the more I watched, the more I felt something gnawing at me. One night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she ran to take a quick shower. That was when I saw it, the one message that turned my world upside down. The message was from her childhood best friend, the man who had suddenly become such a big part of her life. It was short, but its implications were undeniable. "I can't wait to see you tonight. Let's make this our best night yet." My stomach dropped. The words on that screen were like a slap in the face. I felt a cold rush of nausea, a sense of betrayal that hit me harder than I could have prepared for. It was clear. She was already involved with him. She had crossed the line that we had discussed, the line that I had hoped she would never cross. It was not just about the idea of an open marriage anymore. She was having an affair. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew that if I did, I would risk losing control of the situation. I had to gather the evidence I needed before I could do anything. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to her behavior. I watched how she acted, how she interacted with me and with him. It was a slow, painful process, but I needed the truth. Every interaction between them felt different. She was no longer the woman I knew. There was a new energy between them, an electricity that was undeniable. And that was when I knew I had to act. I began following her, not in the way of a paranoid husband, but as someone trying to understand the depth of what had changed. I tracked her phone, noting her movements and when she would disappear for hours. She always told me she was meeting friends or handling errands, but I began to notice the inconsistencies. Her stories did not add up. The lies were small at first, but they piled up quickly. It was one evening when I finally caught them. I had been suspicious of her whereabouts that day, so I decided to visit the place she said she would be. I had no idea what I was expecting, but when I arrived, I saw her walking hand in hand with him. I froze. My heart stopped for a moment, and I felt everything inside me collapse. She was not just spending time with him. She was being intimate, sharing a moment that was supposed to be between us. The worst part was that she saw me. I don't know if she was hoping I would never find out, but in that moment, I saw the fear in her eyes. It was as if the mask had slipped. I had no idea what to say, but the pain of seeing her with him was suffocating. I did not know if I could speak or even move. That night, when she came home, she tried to act like nothing had happened. But I knew everything. I was no longer the husband who was trying to save his marriage. I was the man who had been betrayed, who had been deceived. I confronted her calmly. I did not yell. I did not scream. I just asked one simple question. Why? Her eyes welled up with tears, but I could see the guilt. It was undeniable. She apologized over and over, but I could not hear it. The damage had been done. As the days passed, I found myself sinking deeper into a pit of confusion and anger. The woman I had spent over 17 years with, the person I thought I could trust above all others, had betrayed me in a way I never could have anticipated. Her affair with her childhood friend was no longer just a distant possibility. It was a reality that I had to face. The truth was out there, staring me in the face, and it was more than I could bear. I was no longer the man I had been before, the man who believed in love, in loyalty, in the sanctity of marriage. I had been shattered into pieces, left to pick up what was left of my dignity and self-worth. I needed to process everything, but nothing could prepare me for what would come next. What I didn't expect was how far she would go to justify her actions. In the aftermath of my discovery, my wife tried to convince me that it had been a momentary lapse, a mistake. She claimed that her feelings for me had faded over the years, and that reconnecting with her childhood friend had simply awakened something in her. A desire for excitement, for something new. But the more she spoke, the more I realized that this wasn't about a momentary lapse. This was about something deeper, something I could not fix. I wanted to believe that there was some sliver of truth in her words, but the more she spoke, the less sense it made. I asked myself, how could she justify throwing away everything we had built together for a fleeting moment of excitement? How could she justify shattering our family for someone who was nothing more than a distant memory from her past? Her words felt empty, meaningless, as if she was simply trying to save herself from the consequences of her actions. What made it even harder to bear was the fact that she had pushed for an open marriage in the first place. She had suggested it, she had insisted on it, and I had agreed, thinking it was a way to strengthen our bond, to evolve as a couple. Instead, it had opened the door for betrayal. She had gotten what she wanted, but I had lost everything. It was clear now. This wasn't about exploring our relationship. This was about her personal desires and needs, disregarding mine in the process. The worst part was the emotional distance that had been growing between us for years. I had noticed it before, but I had been so blind to the signs. I had tried to brush it off, to convince myself that things would get better, that we would find our way back to each other. But it was too late. She had already made her choice. She had chosen him. And yet, when the reality of her affair came to light, I was the one left to deal with the aftermath. It was as though she wanted to shift the blame onto me, to make me feel guilty for her actions. She told me that I had not been attentive enough, that I had not given her the attention she craved. But I knew that was a lie. I had done everything I could to support her, to love her. I had sacrificed so much for our family, for our life together, and this is how she repaid me? I began to realize that the relationship we had was not built on the foundation I thought it was. It was built on convenience, on complacency, and on her own desires. She had used me for stability while she explored her own wants. It was a painful revelation, one that cut deeper than any betrayal I could have imagined. The moment that truly shattered me was when she asked for my forgiveness. She begged me to understand that she had been confused, that she was lost in a moment of weakness. But I could not forgive her. Not yet. Not until I fully understood the depth of her betrayal. I had given her everything. My trust, my heart, my loyalty, and she had thrown it all away for a fleeting connection with someone who had no place in our lives. She had chosen him over me, over our family, and there was no coming back from that. I knew that if I forgave her, it would only enable her to do it again. And I could not allow that. I left our home, not in anger, but in sorrow. I left because I could no longer live in a house where the woman I loved no longer existed. She was gone, replaced by someone unrecognizable, someone who was more interested in herself than in the life we had built together. It was painful, it was heartbreaking, but I knew that it was the only way to move forward. What followed was a blur of emotions. Anger, betrayal, sadness, and confusion. But as the days went by, I started to feel a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, I felt free. I was no longer bound to a woman who did not value me, who did not appreciate the sacrifices I had made for our family. I was free to rebuild my life, to find my own happiness again. And that was something I had not felt in a long time. Leaving my wife was the hardest decision I had ever made, but it was also the clearest. There was no turning back. The moment I walked away, I expected to feel an unbearable weight, but instead, I felt lighter. The betrayal had already cut deep, but there was no longer any uncertainty. I was no longer trapped in a marriage that had become a lie. The divorce process started immediately. My wife, who had once been so bold in pushing for an open marriage, suddenly acted as though she had no idea how things had gone so wrong. She called, texted, and even showed up at my workplace. She swore she had made a mistake. She cried about how she had been confused, about how she thought she needed something new, but now she realized she had destroyed everything. I listened. I let her speak, but I was not moved. It was not just the cheating that had ended our marriage. It was the months of deception, the manipulation, the way she had tried to make me feel like I was the problem when, in reality, she had been the one making decisions without considering me. She had gotten what she wanted, a taste of something new, and she had thrown away our life together for it. Now she regretted it, but regret was not enough to undo the damage. As the legal proceedings moved forward, her attitude changed. She went from apologetic to resentful. She accused me of overreacting, of not giving our marriage a chance to heal. She wanted mediation. She wanted therapy. She wanted anything that would stop the inevitable. But I was already past the point of repair. I was no longer the man who had spent years putting her first. I was done. Then her affair partner left her. Whatever they had shared, it had fallen apart the moment it had real consequences. Maybe he had not wanted to be responsible for breaking up a marriage. Maybe she had assumed that their connection would be enough to sustain something long-term, but he had not been interested in commitment. He had been interested in the thrill, in the chase. And when the dust settled, he was gone. The realization hit her hard. She was now facing a life she never expected. Alone. And that was when she started trying to get me back. She showed up at my apartment one night, unannounced. Her face was streaked with tears, her voice shaking. She admitted that she had been selfish, that she had let her desires blind her to what truly mattered. She begged me to reconsider, to at least try and rebuild what we had lost. I let her talk, but the answer was already clear. I told her that love was not just about feelings, it was about trust, about actions. And she had proven, over and over again, that she did not value our marriage the way I did. I had spent years loving someone who had not loved me the same way in return. I was not about to repeat that mistake. She sobbed. She pleaded. But I stood firm. It was over. The divorce was finalized within a few months. I kept the house. She moved in with a friend. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she was struggling, that she had lost herself in the mess she had created. But that was no longer my concern. I had spent enough time sacrificing for someone who did not deserve it. It was time for me to focus on myself. For the first time in years, I started living for me. I reconnected with old friends, started traveling, and pursued hobbies I had long abandoned. I learned how to be alone, how to heal, and slowly the pain of betrayal turned into something else, growth. One day, I received a message from her. It was long, emotional, filled with regret. She told me she still loved me, that she knew she had made a mistake, that she wished she could undo everything. But I did not respond. I had already moved on. She had wanted an open marriage. Now she had an open life, without me in it, and I had never been happier. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to share this video with your friends.